Welcome to the IMM Friday Flash Talk, anchored by Govin Whittles.
The reason why that responsibility was taken away from the Hawks is not yet known.
With marketing enthusiast Terasai Moffat.
To have a return on sales, you need to have posts that are going to be engaging.
The IMM Institute's Friday Flash Talk. Welcome to another installment of the IMM Institute's Friday Flash Talk with myself, Govin Whittles, and my co-host, Terasai Moffat. It's such a pleasure to speak to everyone again. On this platform, we try to bring you the latest insights into the world of marketing, what's happening, where's it going, and what you should keep top of mind when putting together your campaigns and your strategies. This Friday Flash Talk is so important for what we do on the African continent when it comes to marketing, and we bring you trendsetters, those in the know, the tip of the spear of the people who are in marketing. And today it's an absolute pleasure to introduce once again Helen McIntee. She is the president and co-founder of the African Marketing Confederation. She joined us during the last season of the IMM Friday Flash Talk, and we had a brilliant conversation. We got a lot of great feedback from that, and this time around, we're hoping for the same engagement. So do tweet about it, post on LinkedIn, add your comments, discuss it, and take the conversation forward. We're always looking to engage on all the social media platforms. But today we're talking about a very interesting subject, marketing for good. What does that mean? And how does marketing exist within a world that keeps changing to be more considerate? Helen is someone who's not only had a look at this, but has been quoted extensively about where the industry is going and what the ideas are that people have in mind. And Helen, it's a pleasure once again for you to join us. Please do take us away with what I'm interested in. First of all, what is marketing for good, and how do we think about it?
Thank you. Thanks. It's always very nice to be here. And thanks to everybody. Thank you both for inviting me and allowing me to talk on a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. I think in my experience over the past few months, and especially post-pandemic, it's become so important to think about not just the environment, but to think about the people as well. We've got a lot of mental health and anxiety issues. And I think what Marketing for Good is doing is it's encompassing both our sustainable marketing, mindfulness, which is more about the human element. So to me, it's relationship marketing on steroids. If I go back to when I used to lecture relationship marketing, it was all about developing a relationship with your consumer. You were hoping to have a longer term relationship, something that was more valuable, as opposed to just selling one burger or just selling one car. You wanted to develop relationships, so get to know your customer a lot better and have them come back for more. And I think Marketing for Good is understanding your consumer, understanding your environment, showing values that show that you appreciate as a company, you appreciate your environment, you appreciate climate change, sustainability, but you also appreciate your consumer and their anxiety and their mental issues that they may have in perhaps buying a high-risk product. So it's kind of as I say, relationship marketing on steroids, involving going back to the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit.
Very interesting. Relationship marketing on steroids. Terasai, what do you think about marketing for good?
So marketing for good, traditionally, marketing has been about sales. We have to push as much as we can and get consumers to buy as much as possible so that we can have bottom line and we can have return on investment into the businesses that we are producing and into the products that we're producing. But what's now happening when we say people, planet, profit, it means now we're saying, okay, yes, there's elements of you need to make a profit, but there's also the elements that you need to be considerate of people and what people value. And people now value sustainability. People now value brands that are authentic. People now value brands that have meaning and have some form of social impact towards what they are addressing. So now they're even focusing on the 4 Ps, which is something that we are going to talk about from an education point of view, to say even your 4 Ps, before it used to be product, price, placement, promotion. How is your product being manufactured? Where is it being manufactured? What products are you putting into your manufacturing? Are you saving and having waste, or are you ensuring that the products that you're producing have sustainability within them? Not only that, then it goes into the promotion. Where are we placing these? Where are we placing our products? How is it interacting with the consumer? How environmentally friendly is it? Once I drink your cup of coffee, do I throw it in the bin, or is it able to be recycled? What is the impact that we're having and saving for the future? And then obviously what product price, promotion, all of them tie in together in terms of how are we being conscious as marketers or as advertisers, and not just push consumers to buy, but pushing consumers towards the narrative that they need to be sustainable, they need to keep the planet, they need to keep their bodies as well, and what they're putting into their bodies, and all of that ties in together for this carbon footprint.
I'm hearing a lot. Well, the word that's ringing in my head is sustainability. Helen, is marketing for good all about sustainability, or is there something more to it?
I think it's more about, as Terasai quite correctly said, is the values that you want your consumers to see. And I think that does encompass, just to go back to Terasai and the 4 Ps, obviously, if you expand that into the 7 Ps for the services marketing mix, and let's face it, I don't think there's a product out there that doesn't have a service-related aspect to it. We're not ever just selling one product. We're selling a service surrounding it. And the 7 Ps encompass, obviously, as Terasai said, the 4 Ps plus processes, physical evidence, and personnel. And I think that's where the people part of the triple bottom line comes in, the people, planet, profit. So your personnel as part of your marketing mix, very important. Happy employees lead to happy production, happy companies, and they'll therefore happy consumers, customers, and then happy profits at the end of the day. Your processes and your physical evidence, quite rightly, as has been said, need to reflect the values of the corporation, of the organization, how you look. People and consumers have become so tired of greenwashing. Greenwashing is basically an unauthentic, is that a word? Unauthentic way of pretending that you're green, pretending that you're looking after the environment and you're saving trees. In the African Marketing Confederation, most of the conferences that we have on the agenda is sustainability. And we took the attitude at our conference last year in Uganda that basically sustainability is not just bamboo straws or bamboo cutlery in a takeaway joint. It's more than that. It's encompassing, as I say, the way you treat your employees, the way you treat your customers, the way you understand. It's all about psychographics, all about data analytics, getting to know your consumer, building that long-term relationship. How do they feel as opposed to how do they behave? You want to know a lot more than you used to in the past.
Okay, hold on. Is this about changing how we market things towards something that reflects better values, or is it about incorporating something?
Incorporating. And I think as you probably would have seen in that interview, I think the time has come for us to start changing our curricula and our syllabus to embed this. It's not just an add-on elective subject in sustainability, like ethics used to be an add-on, ethical marketing used to be an add-on. It's now been incorporated into our programs and our education. And I think the same thing has to happen with sustainability and marketing for good. I use that as a more umbrella term.
Terasai, we're considering marketing for good here, and the sustainability around that. Are those conversations happening between marketers?
Well, We have really totally changed the way we live our commercial lives. I mean, we're now investing more in our minds, in our hearts, in our spirits. You can see that there's a shift in culture in being self-aware. What you wear, what you eat kind of defines who you are. So even when you get to networking platforms as a marketer, how you dress, you know, some now want to be authentically African and dress only in African attire. Already that's a consumer or shift in perspective. Or they want to, or marketers want to predominantly be corporate and Americanized because maybe they belong to global entities. All of those things are now playing into the narratives and into the discussions that we're having on the different networking platforms. And the main thing that's coming out is people want to be authentic to their true self. And the brands that they represent, are they being authentic to their true self? We have marketers now that are actually resigning from some of their jobs on the premises that they are promoting something that ideally they do not believe in. So
Wow.
it has to do with that in shaping how the consumers have gone now, especially since with COVID and the rise of mental health and, you know, take care of yourself, take care of your health, take care of your family. There is that consciousness even amongst marketers to say, are we promoting what we would give our own children or what we would buy for ourselves, or are we just push marketing it? So there are those discussions that are happening within the boardrooms. And obviously, at the end of the day, everyone needs a job, but people also want jobs that have meaning.
Helen, where does the mirroring of what we're seeing in society in marketing come from? Where does marketing for good come from? Does it emerge organically around the world, or is it pioneered somewhere and being applied and then we're learning?
I think it's emerging. I think that the pandemic had a lot to do with the particular marketing for good in terms of, as I said, employees. I think we all went into a great state of fear. Lots of people lost their jobs. I mean, the whole world went into a very high anxiety mode. We're still trying to recover from that. And I think what we're trying to do now is be kind to one another. So I think that side of it, from the human element side, has emerged. I think from a consumer side, climate change, sustainable marketing, environmental, you know, Africa, it's well documented that Africa is produce a very, very low fraction of the global gas emissions. We don't really participate in that part of it, unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, but it is the continent that is the least able to adapt to the effects of climate change. Africa, with its extreme weather conditions, its low economic stability, in economic development in certain areas. So we need to start looking at environmental change, climate change, sustainability, but we need to actually do an educational job, because largely in Africa, there's a very low awareness. People are just trying to recover post-pandemic. They're trying to make their, I mean, look at the floods happening in Kenya. How are companies or organizations or marketers going to help assist those people? So it's not just about combating the environment and the climate change. It's also about assisting the people that are affected by it. And if we as marketers don't see that as a way of getting in touch with our consumers, then I think we're going in the wrong direction. I think we need to face this. It's emerging. It's actually emerged. It's not emerging. It's emerged, and we have to address it as marketers. We have to address it from a purpose-led, a cause, ethical marketing strategy. We have to craft those marketing strategies to address it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the word is pressure. Terrace, is there any conversation happening around whether marketers feel under pressure to craft strategies that respond to the emergence of marketing for good? I mean, are they scratching their head saying, hey, we really need to incorporate this into our brand identity while they're developing products?
There is definitely, you can see in terms of the industrialization that's happening, especially within South Africa, the type of industries that are being built that are solar powered. So most of the buildings, there's that element of we now need to have solar systems, which is saving on the ecosystem and call on electricity. And the offices that are being built are very green in terms of waste, in terms of recycling, the company culture, even some of the CSR projects. So before, CSR projects would be, oh, we're going to just go to some township and hand over a few soccer balls. Now you're seeing there's a change. They're saying, let's build within the communities, let's build infrastructures within there. Let's make sure that when we do our CSR projects, we are installing solars within the schools, or we are making sure there's some form of continuous, it's not just, oh, we donated a gift and gave it away. So you can see, especially within South Africa, there is that concerted effort to make sure that from the building, the workplace, the culture, everything is going towards that route.
That's a very interesting example, and I think it's a route that a lot of companies have chosen to associate themselves with areas, particularly townships, adopting schools, and so on, and those are kind of like the highlights, the things that stand out for me. But really, the question is, why would you do that as a company? What kind of money could you possibly make from that? How could you improve your brand sales? Is that the right question to ask, Helen? I mean, it seems like we should be considerate of return on investment.
Absolutely. And I think that's where I go. If I can go back, I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I'm very much to going back to marketing basics. And that's why I said this is really all about relationship marketing on steroids. It's also segmentation at a different level. We've got big data now, we've got data analytics, so we can get into the minds of our consumer much better than we used to be able to, but it's still psychographic segmentation. We need to know how they behave, what they value, what they appreciate. And so I think it all dovetails into the fact that we want to build an authentic long-term relationship with our consumers. How do we do that? We find out what they want, what they appreciate, and what they value. And if that means corporate social responsibility, and those people are going to buy more of our product because we are investing heavily into a new sports stadium, then isn't that, at the end of the day, going to increase our turnover and our bottom line?
It could. Does it? Teresa, you would know.
Well, let's give a popular example. The soap, the white soap.
I think we could mention them since we're only talking about good things now.
Okay, so let's see, for example, Dove. Dove sales have skyrocketed because Dove has made a conscious decision that in as much as social media at the present moment is making young girls and women or men feel like they're inadequate because they are not beautiful enough or they haven't been filtered enough. Dove has said, let's take a step back. Let's look at being your authentic self. Let's talk about using pure natural ingredients on yourself versus using products that are going to harm your skin because you're trying to bleach and all of that. They have done a reverse and shown what would be the impact of social media versus just going back to the basics of having clean soap, beautiful soap, using clean ingredients that are not going to have an impact on your skin, that are good for teenagers, cleanses their skin. And because of that, their sales have skyrocketed because it's saying, don't live the social media life that makes you feel inadequate, but rather go back to your original beauty. Just by doing that, they have created a sustainable campaign that has increased their sales. You want to look at, for example, Starbucks. They have purposefully made themselves green. The cups that they use are recyclable. The premises that they use are all green, solar powered, and they have pushed that agenda within the market. If you recycle trees, you can come and if you plant a tree, you can come and get a free cup of coffee. Those type of initiatives, again, their sales has skyrocketed. Does it apply to every brand? I'm not sure, because you can see currently in the landscape, Shell has just pulled out of South Africa because we haven't gone green as quickly as possible. We're not using the vehicles, the electric vehicles quick enough for the change that they want. And because of that, they are pulling out of South Africa. So it has to do with some of those things to say, from a brand, perhaps it wasn't going to be profitable for them. That was the reason why they decided that we're not at that stage. But from a South African consumer market point of view, we're not perhaps ready to go electrical vehicles full force. So there's lots of dynamics at play, and each has to do with the different brand and the different brand's messaging. But I think the bottom line is each brand can do its part in one way or the other.
I have a few comments on that, but before I do, Helen, do you have any notable case studies you'd like to mention?
Very difficult in the African continent. And that's one of the reasons we started the African Marketing Confederation, is to start putting together some case studies, or real authentic African case studies that provide solutions for African marketing problems. The only one that really stands out is Nedbank, and I think it's a whole beautiful campaign on showing the environment from a bird's eye view, what you can do, what if nobody does anything about it? What if somebody does about it? And it's all about the values. But their payoff line really, well, or their discussion around this was, do you want to be with an organization that talks about sustainability, or do you want to be with an organization that walks the sustainability path? And I think obviously the walks is true. And I'd just like to comment on what Tara said. Each brand is different. Quite correctly, we're in South Africa, we're not ready for electric cars. We're not ready for, well, our roads aren't really ready for normal cars. So I think I can understand. It's a trend, and it's a case of looking at each market as an organization, looking at each market and saying, okay, at what stage of the sustainability or the climate change, environmental awareness is our market, and what can we do, if anything, to actually assist and to actually deliver something to our consumers on that basis.
Why are we implementing the emergence of marketing for good so slowly in South Africa? Let's just take South Africa. I know our economy is what you would call an old money economy, where a lot of the big movers of our GDP come from fossil fuels. Our extractive industry is still under pressure at this point to go green, while our automotive industry is not developing at the same pace as the European one. But our consumers only seem to care about marketing for good in the product industry or service industry. It looks like they're okay with the fossil fuels in the extractive and the big GDP movers. And I know a lot of marketers who watch this also work for those big firms, they're wondering, okay, what does marketing for good look like at a mining company, at a manufacturing company that's not making stuff using lithium batteries or making electric vehicles?
I think it's a level of sophistication. This is not a criticism on South Africa, but on so many of our markets are just trying to get by at the moment. That's what happened really in the 1990s when the King Commission first introduced the triple bottom line, is everyone was saying, look, we're just trying to make ends meet. We're just trying to recover from the global recession. And now we've got to start thinking about recycling our tin cans and recycling and solar power. And I think a lot of our markets in South Africa today, a lot of our consumers are just trying to get by. So if that means getting into a car that uses fuel instead of an electric car, so I can go and be a taxi service in a local town, I'm trying to earn a living. It's not really going to worry me whether I'm damaging the product by using a fossil fuel. So I think that's where we're at. And I think as time goes on, hopefully that'll change. I think we're still a lot of people are just trying to get by.
Is that why we're implementing it so slowly? Teresa, what do you think?
I think just to add to that, from fossil fuels, minerals, there is pressure currently within the mining sector, even within investors, that when you invest within a country or you invest within a community, you must leave something behind that is tangible. And you will see in the cases within the mining sector, they're even looking at the rivers and how they clean the rivers within that community that they are mining within, which will lead to sustainability, because obviously rivers drive into the marine corridors and all of that and into the ocean. So there is that's happening from the mining sector as well, and some of those drives and initiatives. There is a 1% tax that has been applied in other countries to say 1% of it must go back towards the community in which you are mining, or you're doing your fossils, or within where you're what is that English word?
Excavating, yeah.
Yes, from that community. So that 1% goes back into the community towards building schools, building hospitals, or some form of, so in every community that you are now mining, it's no longer a case of just extracting. It's now a case of, are you giving back, and what is your agenda or proposal as an investor to give back to that community? So I think there are strides that are happening, and that comes even through regulation. So the governments are actually regulating, and that comes back to the marketing for good. As we keep on having marketing for good and keep on communicating that this is important, it begins to affect regulation. And that regulation is what's going to make it so that the rest of the industries can move ahead faster.
That was an interesting part of the article, the role of governments and regulators in keeping an eye on what or how messages are being communicated, essentially. Helen, the South African Competition Commission was sharp or quick to react during the pandemic to what they called, what was it, irregular pricing for
Yes.
PPE.
Yes.
But have they shown any indication that they're monitoring, what is it, unethical communication around marketing?
I think that that has always been their goal. I think that in terms of the regulation there, yeah, I tend to agree with you. You caught me a little bit. I've got to think about that. I hadn't really been thinking about that, but I don't believe that out there we have too many ethical practices, too many unethical, advertising practices and communication practices. I think we've, as consumers in this country, we're very much aware, and we'll certainly bring it to the notice of the competitions and the advertising standards and so on. I don't know what I kind of, if I can throw it back to you guys, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree here.
It's been a long time since I've seen complaints about an advert, well, except for the last week where the South African flag was burnt, and that's an entirely different political conversation. But I can't recall the last inappropriate advert, at least from a South African perspective or African perspective. Terasai, it seems like our marketers have been very, very considerate of what firstly offends, but secondly, what would be crossing the line.
I definitely agree with that. Even within the marketers and the advertisers, even media planners, media buyers, the whole industry, we have to recognize it's people. And they are more conscious of this. You know, they themselves are people, they themselves are mothers, they themselves are fathers, they themselves are, you know, friends, family, they care. So before, when it was mostly predominantly consumerism and a push for consumerism, you have a lot of creative directors, or you have a lot of marketing managers also communicating within their personal and public space about what their beliefs and who their identity is. And that also plays a role within their campaigns. So they're no longer, I mean, we've got classic examples, Woolworths, Unilever, they are making commercials that make sense. They are making commercials that have an impact. They are making commercials and conversations that drive a narrative. So in as much as the digital landscape is cut an ad to 6 seconds and push it out there, they're going about different ways, road shows, activations on the ground, going into the schools, going into the universities, forming that education. There's actually a prediction that by 2050, carbon skills will be part of your job description. So If we don't start
That makes
implementing
sense.
that is going to be a problem. So I think those type of organizations are pushing that narrative, and hopefully it's going to become regulation even within the education system.
But
That makes
isn't that
sense. I mean,
wonderful? Sorry.
Helen, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, isn't that wonderful? What just we've all just agreed is that we've seen very little unethical and bad non-influential sort of advertising in the past little while. So maybe marketing for good is starting there. It's starting in the communication and the agency business, and hopefully feeding through. And our big corporations are sitting down with the agency and saying, no, that's not the way we want to portray ourselves. That let's go and let it be a bit more human, as Tara said, and so on has said. So I think that's good news.
Yeah, maybe marketing for good is more the fact that we're not offending right now than it is the big campaigns that speak about green hydrogen as a possible replacement fuel, although that there is probably a huge opportunity right now, wouldn't you say, in an within the African setting, that
Huge.
to pioneer marketing campaigns that speak to this new, well, I don't want to call it a bubble, but this new wave of consideration that's already established globally.
Yes, and I think it is such a topical, as I mentioned earlier, it's such a topical thing that we're talking about. On probably the last 4 African conferences I've been to, there it's been on the agenda: sustainability, climate change, marketing for good, whatever you want to call it, but it's right there. Everybody is now thinking about it. Unfortunately, as I say, there's such different levels. Each country is so different in terms of its sophistication and its economic ability and its resources to support it, but it's definitely top of mind whether or not they can follow through on it at this stage or not.
Speaking about that, where do people discuss these kinds of emerging strategies, Helen?
Well, at African marketing conferences. I just want to encourage everybody. Our next AMC, our 3rd annual AMC conference, is going to be held in Kenya, in Mombasa, in September, the 25th to the 27th. And this whole topic will certainly be one of the overriding themes on at the conference. So I encourage anyone who's interested or who would like to find out more to either attend in person, or hopefully we'll have an online section as well.
Parasite, when you attend a conference like that, what happens? Just explain the practicality of it. So you'll see a presentation on this emerging strategy, right? Do you then grab another marketer, or do companies who are there then say, "Oh, let me go look for someone quickly," and have a sidebar which leads to business?
So it depends on the audience in the room. I mean, if it's an investor summit, for example, then what would happen in an investor summit is the investors would then drive the discussions further and how much they're going to invest in, and et cetera, et cetera. That would be from an investment summit. From a marketing summit, what would then happen is we would hopefully shape some form of framework afterwards that would say this is the industry practice. I know the African Marketing Confederation runs a chief marketing officer training workshop where they actually, or chartered institute marketer, where some of these lessons would then be taught, and a framework would then be created, and that would go out even to research. And there would be research papers and research announcements that would go through, and then that can be one way of taking it forward. Alternatively, it then becomes about relationship building and relationship networking. So you form almost stakeholder engagements where you're now in engagement together, because some tenders are actually going out, or some briefs are actually going out now that have this specific requirement in mind. So if you meet at this conference and you see that you have similar ideas and values, then maybe you can apply for a tender together and run this campaign together, etc. So then there's that stakeholder engagement, because now you have a similar value shared system, so to speak.
And then, Helen, what does that look like to the the consumer or to, say, business to business marketing, do you then start to pick up a shift in what companies are looking for or what business to business marketing officers are requiring on their briefing documents?
I think we haven't got quite down to that nitty-gritty yet with our conferences. As I said, we've only had 2 so far. What has been fascinating is the way in which we have attracted so much interest in Africa through the African Marketing Confederation. I was invited last year to present at the World Marketing Forum in Thailand. And my first slide was a picture of the continent saying, "This is not a country." I think we've discussed this before at the IMM offices in another presentation. But I think there's so much interest now. A lot of people will go, "Oh, I'm going to Africa." And then, well, where in Africa? There's so many different countries, there's so many different cultures, there's so many different stages of economic development, agriculture, mining, tourism. We need to start marketing the continent better. And I think through the conferences, we are doing that in saying, come to Africa because there's so many lessons to be learned, but there's also so many different kinds of opportunities. So I think now that we're starting to get there, we've just signed a collaborative MOU with the Asian Marketing Federation. They want to share knowledge. Our African members at the AMC want to share knowledge, network. They'll be attending the conference in Africa. They've got 17 members, including Japan, China, Thailand, Indonesia. So it's big. And so hopefully they'll come over and we'll start sharing stories with them, because I think, especially in terms of sustainability and marketing for good, they've got sophisticated economies that are probably quite further down the line than we are, and we can start sharing that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. At that conference, you discussed mindfulness.
Yes.
It's one of the interesting bits, and the South Asian approach to mindfulness is to slow down, isn't it?
Yes.
To take care.
Yes.
What if we've gotten that far along, what does mindfulness in the African context when being applied by marketers look like?
I think we're just starting out on the thought process on that. I think we're still hamsters in the cage. We're just going round and round. And what the Asian marketers are saying is, get a different perspective. Sit down, breathe, smell the roses, and maybe in that way you'll think a little bit clearer and then find perhaps different solutions and different strategies. Maybe just have a sit down and have a think tank, but a calm and kind think tank. No criticism, no why haven't you made your sales this month, this, that, and the other. Let's just take a breather, guys, and say, let's try and look at this business in a slightly different manner. Maybe we're approaching it from the wrong way. Maybe if we introduce some kind of other crafted strategy, we'll find a different solution. So it really is just saying, calm down a little bit, guys. Let's just breathe. I'm not saying all day and every day, of course, there's business work to be done, but maybe take a strategic session out into the bush and just say, let's try and look at things a little bit differently. Or yourself as an employee, go home, sit down, meditate, think, do whatever you do, but change it.
I mean, yes, I think corporate culture just in Johannesburg has changed, where the environments have become more considerate,
I agree.
more pleasing to the eye. But I think that you would agree that we love our getaways in the bush, but South African corporates thrive on the fast-paced, cutthroat, let's get it moving. And I wonder whether mindfulness for us would look a little different, or maybe it's just because it's not been developed that much. It's an opportunity for people to define it. Teresa, what do you think?
And mindfulness, and in the African context.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot of self-care in that we do, that we practice. Maybe we might not necessarily call it mindfulness. I think because in Africa, we have our aunties and our uncles and our grandparents near us, advising us, counseling us, because we have nannies or peers and some of those type of additions to our lives, which the Western world may not necessarily have, I think there is a certain level of, we do get some time to stop. We are getting busier, yes, but I think we do get moments to be ourselves, authentically ourselves.
We should all be a little bit more like the Cape Townians. Make it a bit
And start
sloppy.
work at 9.
Slopstats, yeah. I got a lot of time for Cape Town because
And
of the
just go surf
creativity.
for a couple of hours.
And maybe that's why some of the best campaigns come out of Cape Town.
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
they're surfing for a few hours before and taking a look at how people are relaxing and then speaking to them in that relaxed tone. I do think there's an incredible opportunity here. But again, why would they do this? Again, like what kind of money can you make by really taking, say, 10% of your marketing strategy and dedicating it to marketing for good? Is there any data on that, Helen?
Not as far as I know yet. I think it's, as I say, it's a new concept. To me, it's not a new concept, actually. It's a new term for an old concept. But yeah, I can't really think of put money figures to it, but I know that we're working very hard on data analytics, which is really not just about figures. It's about getting to know our customers better, which is about marketing for good. Because if I know my customers better and I know where they're coming in onto my website, maybe they're sitting at home or maybe they're in a restaurant somewhere, if I can drill down enough and find out how they spend their time, where they are, how often they want to know what information, what their behaviors are, then surely I can produce a marketing strategy that best fits them, which leads to improved. And I don't think it costs a great deal more money. I think you'll see that in your profits just by concentrating better on the minds and hearts and behaviors of our customers.
Let me ask it in this way. Many times agencies are competing for business from companies, right? And agencies these days mostly have access to a lot of data, AI tools,
Yes.
and different marketing platforms. They've incorporated all of them, digital to traditional. And they're kind of on the same setting when they're going into that meeting competing. Do you think that the incorporation of marketing for good strategies could tip the scales to make a company decide?
I do. I honestly, I would rather give my business to a company that I think is being kind and caring and environmentally aware and have good, strong values and morals. I would rather give my business. So I think until they catch up, that could be a differentiator.
Well, then it's a no-brainer. You'd have to include it. Don't you think, Teresa?
I agree. It just the only one that I wonder, which is almost a question or a thought process, is what about in the like extremely, call them high density areas where in that case it's literally about, are you going to buy a small slab of butter because you have 10 rand versus are you going to buy a huge tin of butter because you have 50 rand? Like where the economies of scale play a role. I just want to ask or put out a question if this all matters so much to them.
What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, I think again, it's giving the consumer what they would want and value. And as you say, if that's the big one, economies of scale, or it's the small one, I think, again, going back to, and you mentioned it right earlier, the 4 Ps, and what we really didn't discuss is pricing. If we are spending as an organization a huge amount of money on CSR, on mindfulness or marketing for good, it's obviously in some way perhaps going to affect the pricing. So then it's about turn. Then we've got to go back and say, okay, but our consumers can't afford that. How else can we do marketing for good without spending huge amounts of money and still give the customer what they want at a price that they can afford? So it's no one thing, is it? It's all about pulling together what we need. It's a marketing toolbox, and we use whatever tools we can to get the best possible strategy marketing is about getting your customer to buy your product. But I think after this discussion, it's getting your customer to buy your product because you are mindful, you are kind, you have values, you have morals, you are authentic, you are ethical, you are cause-driven, purpose-driven. It's creating a whole new view of organizations and a whole new view of consumers.
Is that a difficult question? If we incorporate marketing for good strategy, or if we incorporate a bit of sustainability, it makes the product a little more expensive. Let's find a different way to incorporate it. Is that a difficult task? Finding a different way? Or do you think there are cheaper ways to do that?
I think it's marketing. I think since marketing began in the 60s, we've been trying to do that. There's always been new innovations. There's always been new topics. There's always been things that people have spoken about and talked about. Okay, now we're into sustainability and climate change and looking after the environment. But in the 70s, it was probably something else. And the 80s, there was another topic and another global this. And then there was the war in Vietnam. You know what I mean? There's always something. And if we're good marketers and we're well-trained and professional marketers, we will find those strategies that match our consumers' needs.
And also on top of that, when you look at even within the African context, I mean, we are starting to replace some of the expensive global inputs that we're using with local inputs. I'm sure you've seen the rise of moringa and people using moringa because that is something that we can find, let's say, in our back garden, but is also extremely healthy for the body. So it's using alternative products that we can find within Africa versus importing a product that's going to be very expensive. Just by making that shift within what products or what ingredients you use, you already are saving money or revenue in some regard that you can use towards marketing for good. So look at the whole supply chain and your inputs and your product design and what you can use to be able to leverage marketing for good.
Absolutely.
I think what I'm hearing is that pricing changes shouldn't be an excuse not to include marketing for good strategies. Well, let me perhaps raise this. This is my input. You know, good is not a definitive concept. It's not a universally agreed upon concept either. Just with regards to climate change, coal is bad, but people are not certain whether carbon capture technology is good, although marketing carbon capture technology may be a marketing for good strategy. And not to focus on good, but I think that one of the downstream associations or thoughts on good is association. And associating with things can be to the detriment of brands or could really help them spiral upwards. And cancel culture obviously is a big consideration because it keeps defining what's good and changing what's good. How big of a consideration is association for brands when it comes to marketing for good?
Gavin, you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's absolutely massive. And I think you're quite right. Good is open to interpretation. It is many things to many people. So once again, back to the drawing board, understand what good means to your consumers. Understand if you associate, you know, the mining industry is coming under a lot of fire at the moment. But if you think about it, if we don't have mines, we don't have bridges, we don't have iron girders, we don't have buildings, we don't have, you know, there's so much that we need to do it. So the mining industry, I think, has got a lot of marketing work to be done in order to show that while they are necessary industry, they are helping and they are not just stripping the land, the whole fracking thing and everything. So I think it's, again, definitions. Who you associate with, very important with the wars going on in the world at the moment. There's a lot of people moving away from one product because that product has got a particular, I don't know, association with one side of the war. So yeah, very important to understand those. Again, getting back to psychographics and knowing what your customers want, your consumers want, and what associated companies mean to them and what marketing for good means to them. It's very interesting. I'm actually going to give that a lot of thought afterwards because yes, we tend to think good is what we define as good. but a lot of other people would define it differently. Thank you. I'm going to work on that one.
And you know, what's interesting is that people are not allowing brands to stay away from issues. And I think that they're pressing brands to take a view, even when they don't want to.
Exactly.
And it's putting them in an uncomfortable position, which I think will probably lead to marketing officers getting more important titles in boardrooms. And I hate to say that that's a positive spin-off,
Yes.
but it probably is. Teresa, I mean, have you seen any examples of those on the African continent, or do you think that that's, again, something that's happening across the ocean?
Sorry, Galvin, please repeat your question.
I mean,
Examples
like
of...
with brands being pressed to take positions, even when they don't want to. I think that
Oh.
the pressing one for South Africa would be fees must fall, right? That's an issue that a lot of brands try to stay away from. And then I don't think that we had one openly except our very famous chicken brand, which does not care about any issue. They'll jump in. And 99% of the time, I believe they've got it right and grown their customer base because of the way that they've done it. But do you think that there are those issues and that's still something that's happening in the African context?
Definitely, there'll always be that, especially now with the prevalence of the phone and being able to shoot and record any moment and tweet and tag, and then it becomes a whole social media war and social media battle. And has the brand responded? Have they commented? Has they released a statement? You know, everything just spirals at this point, and it's a pity for brands and for marketing managers, because it's like you get into work, the next minute you find out your brand was online trending for X, Y, and Z because someone recorded it out of context, and it just begins to spiral. Now you're sitting in meetings trying to do management, damage control, and reputational control, and all of that. So unfortunately, that is the reality at the present moment, and I don't know if there's a way to steer away from it. It would be hard to say.
If I could just, again, going back to basics, I know it's far accelerated now, but if we go back to marketing 20 years ago, something will go wrong with your product. It was taught, it's still in the curriculum, something will go wrong. Doesn't matter what you do, some consumer will be upset, one of the processes, you'll be out of stock or something. And it's really how you recover from that. And now it's been so fast accelerated, as you're right, with the phone and the social media. But maybe we as marketers need to relook those. There was a 10-step program. When something goes wrong, what do you do? You know, get back, communicate with the consumer, tell them how you're going to sort it out, etc., etc. So now with all these other ways of complaints coming to the attention of the organization, maybe we need to relook a recovery process. In, you know, Budweiser, for example, one person messed up that entire campaign. One person, she got fired, the brand is still suffering. So we're all human as well. So there needs to be some kind of step-by-step process, or at least a number of processes. Okay, I've got problem A, how do I deal with it? I've got problem B, how do I deal with it? And it's not just about good PR. It's about getting people involved, explaining, and it's heavy. Yeah, it's a shame, but we need to be able to deal with it. Otherwise, we're going to lose those consumers forever.
Suppose it comes down to brand identity. If people really know you to be a good brand with good values, then when something bad happens to you or bad happens with your brand, they'll see that as the exception to the rule and not who you are. So you got to reinforce who you are at all times. This has been very insightful. As usual, let's talk about what you think the highlights were of the conversation for marketers out there who are now, after this, convinced that they would have to incorporate at least a part of this into their strategy. What do you think they should keep in mind? Teresa, I'll start with you, and then Helen, you can have the last word.
So what they should keep in mind. So for example, on the 25th of May, we have Africa Day. And that is a very, very big, important day in African history, because this is us being one people, one African society. We have the AFCFTA, African Continental Free Trade, saying let's have borderless nations, let's be one people, let's come together as one united front across Africa. And the respecting of everyone's individual cultures and languages and dialects and all of that. So with Africa Day, already this is a challenge as the marketers. What are we doing that is going to show that as Africa, we are sustainable? We value and care about people. We value and care about our product. We value and care about the placement of our product and how we are in the market. Basically, we care. And how are we going to show that, even just as a simple thing as here, this day is coming up? What are we doing for the African nation as brands?
Helen.
I think there's been a lot of very interesting takeouts for me, and I appreciate both your inputs, particularly the definition of the word good. I love that one. But in terms of the African Day, the AMC is becoming quite the leading voice in terms of finding African marketing strategies and solutions. So I would say very much so. We start looking, obviously assisting the current strategists to look at incorporating marketing for good. But I think in terms of the theme of Africa Day, which is education, I think we need to start encouraging our universities, our associations to include whatever definition we have for marketing for good. Maybe there's a theorist out there that could give it a better sort of more in-depth kind of definition, and we need to start incorporating that. As I said, it's not just an add-on anymore. I think it has to be really part of the whole curriculum. So that's my take.
That's awesome. For me, I think it would be that you can't really use pricing as an excuse not to change your strategy. And I'm really interested to see how we'll incorporate this. It's probably out there, but what this conversation is going to do is help me recognize it when it does come up. And I think that might just be all I need to start looking at brands differently, which is what I suspect consumers and other business who do business-to-business marketing will do. Thank you so much, Helen McIntee, President and founder, co-founder of the African Marketing Confederation, and Tarasai Moffat, Gateway Synergy MD, marketing guru, co-host. It's been a real pleasure. I do think that this flash talk is one that's perfectly timed, and it comes at a time where a lot in marketing will change over the next 3 years, 5 possibly as we go towards 2030. And I think that we'll see different ways of marketing on the African continent, in South Africa, in the SADC region. And I'm looking forward to seeing a change in the campaigns. Thank you to everyone who's been watching. We do again encourage you to engage with us on social media, on LinkedIn, where I've learned marketers do most of the talking, but on Instagram, on Twitter, and do tune in again for another installment of the IMM Institute's Friday Flash Talk. I'm Govan Whittles. Thank you for everyone that contributed to this discussion. See you next time.